I took the paychecks my stepdaughter earned at work and used a good portion of that money to support my grown daughter. Later, I even insisted that my stepdaughter give up her college acceptance, and when she was rejected by her dream school, I shared the rejection in our family group chat to knock her down a peg. Now my grown daughter's boyfriend is demanding money from me, my stepdaughter wants nothing to do with me anymore, and my husband has been unfaithful. Looking back, I truly regret the choices I made. I've been part of my stepdaughter's life ever since she was 8 years old. She's 18 now, and her name is Chloe. Her biological mother has spent most of Chloe's life behind bars, so I was the woman who stepped in and helped raise her. I made her meals every day, drove her to school, bought the clothes she needed, attended parent-teacher meetings, signed permission slips, and handled all the little responsibilities that come with raising a child. I dealt with the mood swings, the teenage attitude, the long stretches of silence, and the resentment she carried. People always say that if you marry someone with a child, you know exactly what you're signing up for. What they don't understand is how difficult it can be to raise a child who isn't biologically yours, especially one who comes from such a troubled background. I'll admit that Chloe has always been bright. She consistently earned excellent grades, her teachers loved having her in class, and she carried herself with a quiet seriousness that made adults think she was unusually mature for her age. But inside our home, it felt different. She kept everyone at arm's length, acted as though she was somehow above the rest of us, and while she always did what was expected of her, there was a cold distance about her. It often seemed like she was simply counting the days until she could leave us behind. My husband, Daniel, is Chloe's father, and of course he loves her. The problem is that he's never handled conflict very well. Anytime things became tense between Chloe and me, he usually refused to get involved. He'd tell us that we needed to work it out ourselves or say he wasn't going to take sides. Because of that, most of the responsibility for raising Chloe ended up falling on my shoulders. I also have my own daughter, Madison, who's 22 years old. Unlike Chloe, Madison has had a much harder time finding her place in life. She gave community college a chance, but it just wasn't the right fit for her. Over the years she struggled with anxiety, unhealthy relationships, trouble holding jobs, and plenty of emotional challenges. These days she lives with her boyfriend, Ethan, who's also trying to get his life together. People are quick to judge Madison because she hasn't followed the same path as Chloe, but life doesn't move in a straight line for everyone. That's one of the reasons everything eventually became so messy. Chloe always seemed to be the successful one. She earned top grades, worked a part-time job, filled out college applications, constantly received praise from teachers, and relatives were always asking which university she planned to attend. Meanwhile, Madison was treated like the family's disappointment simply because she was having a difficult time. I honestly tried to keep things balanced between them. Maybe I didn't always get it right, but I believed I was doing my best to keep both girls grounded. Chloe worked part-time at a pharmacy after school and on weekends. Since she was living under our roof, I expected her to help contribute financially to the household. As far as I'm concerned, that's perfectly reasonable, no matter what anyone else thinks. At 18, you're no longer a little kid, and even before that age, teenagers should start learning responsibility. Chloe handed over most of each paycheck to me, and I managed that money along with the rest of our household finances. Before anyone twists my words, I wasn't leaving her with nothing. I made sure she had money for personal hygiene items, bus fare, school supplies, lunches whenever she needed them, and college application fees when those came up. She had a roof over her head, food on the table, electricity, internet access, a phone, and everything else she needed. Yes, some of the money she earned also helped support Madison. Madison simply needed more help at that point in her life. Chloe, on the other hand, was doing just fine. That's how I believed a family should work. When one person is struggling more than the others, everyone helps carry the load. I never thought of it as stealing from Chloe. In my mind, I was simply making sure the whole family stayed afloat. Chloe hated that arrangement from the very beginning. She'd tell me it was her money, and I'd remind her that living in a home isn't free. I also reminded her that, considering her mother's past, It was especially important for her to learn discipline and not become arrogant just because she happened to earn good grades. I know that probably sounds cruel, but I honestly believed a person's background mattered. Chloe's mother made decisions that completely destroyed her own life. I didn't want Chloe believing that being intelligent automatically made her better than everyone else or somehow protected her from the consequences of life. This year she applied to several colleges, including one extremely competitive university that she talked about non-stop. Everyone in the family knew that school was her dream. Her teachers were apparently encouraging her and telling her she had a real chance. She had this picture in her head of leaving the state, moving into a dorm, starting an entirely new life, and never looking back. I thought she was being unrealistic. It wasn't because I doubted her intelligence, I knew she was smart. My concern was that tuition costs money, traveling costs money, and living away from home costs money. On top of that, I honestly felt she could stand to be a little more humble. She had become so accustomed to everyone praising her that she acted as if living in our house was just a temporary stop on her way to something bigger and better. Then the rejection finally came. The university sent the decision by email, and I happened to see it because she'd accidentally left herself logged into the family computer. I know people will say I shouldn't have looked at it, but the email appeared right on the screen while I was trying to print something. I wasn't searching through her account. Her dream school had rejected her. I'll admit something I haven't wanted to say out loud. Part of me actually felt relieved. It wasn't because I wanted to see her heartbroken. I just thought maybe this would finally teach her that the world doesn't automatically reward you because teachers think you're gifted. Maybe she'd stop acting as though the rest of us were beneath her. I took a screenshot of the rejection email. Then I shared it in our family group chat with a message that said, maybe now Chloe will realize that everyone faces rejection sometimes. A little humility is good for people. I added that earning good grades doesn't automatically make someone better than the rest of the family. Before I posted it, I blocked Chloe from the chat. I know how terrible that sounds, but I expected her to react emotionally and lash out. I wanted the adults in the family to discuss it before she turned the whole situation into an argument. Instead, things went completely differently than I expected. Some relatives only responded with uncomfortable sad face emojis. My sister said it seemed like something that should have stayed private. My cousin couldn't understand why I would ever post something like that. Even my own mother told me Chloe needed encouragement instead of public embarrassment. I insisted that I was only trying to teach her humility. That's when everything completely fell apart. What I never mentioned in that group chat was that Chloe had already been accepted to 3 other colleges. Before anyone accuses me of hiding that fact, those acceptances weren't the issue to me. The point, at least in my mind, was that she'd become obsessed with this one dream school and had started acting as though failure wasn't possible. I believed being rejected would teach her an important lesson. Apparently, one of Daniel's cousins took screenshots of the conversation and sent them to Chloe. She stormed into the house absolutely furious. I'd never seen her that angry before. Normally, Chloe gets quiet whenever she's upset. This time, though, she was literally shaking. She looked me in the eyes and asked if I was the one who had shared her rejection letter. I told her I had, and I said that if she hadn't acted like she was better than everyone else, I wouldn't have felt the need to do it. She fired back that I'd blocked her from the group so I could humiliate her without giving her the chance to defend herself. I answered that her dramatic reaction was only proving exactly what I'd been trying to teach her. Then Chloe completely lost it. She started shouting about everything she'd been holding inside for years, the money, Madison, her mother, college, and all the times she believed I'd taken advantage of her. She accused me of stealing the paychecks she'd worked for and using that money to support my adult daughter and Madison's unemployed boyfriend. She said I'd spent years using the fact that her mother was in prison to make her feel ashamed of herself. Then she turned to Daniel and said he was a coward for standing by and letting it happen. Daniel was standing right there, but all he could bring himself to say was, "Let's all calm down." Chloe looked directly at him and replied, "That's all you ever say when she hurts me." I thought that was unfair. Daniel has always provided for her. He may avoid confrontation, but I never believed he was a bad father. Chloe stormed upstairs and immediately started packing her things. I told her not to make such a huge decision over a single post. She looked at me and said, "It was never just one post." Then she exposed everything online, every single bit of it. She uploaded screenshots of all 3 college acceptance letters she'd received. She included the rejection letter I'd posted in the family chat. She shared proof that I'd blocked her before posting it. She also posted our text messages where I'd explained that she couldn't keep all of her paycheck because living in our house wasn't free. Then she uploaded bank records showing every transfer she'd made to me over the previous 2 years. On top of that, she shared messages where I'd written things like, "With your mother's history, you need structure more than most girls," and "Don't act superior when your own mother is where she is." I'll admit those messages sound terrible when people read them without the full context. After that, she wrote, "I was rejected by 1 college. I was accepted by 3 others." She continued, "My stepmother shared my rejection because humiliating me mattered more to her than telling the truth. For the last 2 years she's taken most of my paychecks and used the money to support Madison and Ethan while telling me I should be grateful that she bought me bus fare and toothpaste." That was the moment everything became humiliating for me. She completely destroyed my reputation in front of the entire family. The phone wouldn't stop ringing afterward. My sister called and said she was disgusted by what I'd done. One of Daniel's cousins immediately offered Chloe a place to stay. Even my own mother told me she was ashamed of me. People who barely even knew our family started commenting online, accusing me of financial abuse and emotional abuse. I never abused Chloe. I was strict with her, and in my mind, those are 2 completely different things. The very next day, Chloe packed up and moved into Daniel's cousin's house for the time being. She told everyone she planned to attend one of the colleges that had accepted her and would deal directly with the financial aid office herself so I'd never have access to another penny connected to her. Before she walked out the door, I begged her to think carefully before making such a permanent decision. I suggested she stay closer to home by attending the local college or maybe take a gap year until she'd had time to calm down. I told her that moving away while she was angry would only make things harder for herself. She looked straight at me and said, "You were never trying to humble me. You were trying to make me small enough so Madison wouldn't look so small standing next to me." Those words hurt. Madison isn't perfect, but she's still my daughter, and I'm always going to protect her. That doesn't mean I ever hated Chloe. I honestly believed I was trying to teach her that being successful didn't make her better than everyone else. Now she's acting like I ruined her entire life over 1 rejection letter and because I handled the household finances. Am I really wrong for believing she also owes me an apology for making private family matters public and making me look like some kind of monster? The comments that followed were brutal. One person wrote, "You didn't post her rejection to teach humility. You posted it because her achievements made your biological daughter look bad. That's not parenting." Another added, "That's jealousy hiding behind a stepmother title." I wasn't jealous of Chloe. I genuinely believed she was becoming arrogant. Someone else responded, "She got accepted into 3 colleges, worked a part-time job, paid for her own necessities, and quietly planned her future. That's not arrogance. That's someone planning her escape." Another comment said, "You took her paychecks, handed the money to your adult daughter and her unemployed boyfriend, then publicly humiliated her over 1 rejection while hiding the fact she'd been accepted by 3 other schools. Even Disney villains show more self-control." I still don't believe I stole anything. She lived in our home, and she contributed financially, just like family should. Someone replied, "Family contributions don't usually mean a teenager financially supporting her adult stepsister's boyfriend while receiving toothpaste purchased with her own paycheck." Another person wrote, "You weren't teaching responsibility. You were running a tiny emotional sweatshop." I kept thinking that Chloe had completely destroyed me in front of my family. Someone answered, "No. She simply removed the blindfold you'd placed over everyone else's eyes. You're upset because people can finally see the truth." I still believed she could have handled the situation privately. Someone fired back, "You publicly posted her rejection letter after blocking her from responding. You don't get to complain about privacy after building the glass house yourself." Another comment hit even harder. "Her biological mother is in prison, yet somehow you still became the adult she needed to escape from. Think about that." I reminded myself that I'd stepped up when her own mother couldn't. Someone replied, "No. You stepped on her and called it stepping up." Another person wrote, "You gave Chloe spending money for hygiene products using the paycheck she earned herself, then called that good parenting. Please don't ever say, 'I raised her,' again." I still believed I'd given her a stable home. The response came almost immediately. "A stable home doesn't involve confiscating a teenager's wages while insulting her about her imprisoned mother. That's not stability. That's a hostage situation with Wi-Fi." Someone else pointed out that I'd never mentioned Chloe's 3 college acceptances. I answered that those acceptances weren't the point because the rejection was supposed to teach her a lesson. Another person responded, "The rejection wasn't the lesson. It was the weapon you chose. The real lesson is that Chloe should never trust you with her money, her mail, or her future again." People kept quoting my own words back at me. "With your mother's history, you need structure." That's one of the cruelest things anyone could say. Another added, "You took the deepest wound in that girl's life and turned it into a leash." Yes, background matters. Her background now includes surviving a stepmother who used her mother's imprisonment as a household insult. Congratulations on adding another trauma to her life. Then people started criticizing Daniel too. One person wrote, "Daniel isn't innocent." While his daughter explained years of financial exploitation and emotional humiliation, he just kept repeating, "Calm down." Another said, "He's not neutral. He's basically furniture that happens to have legal custody." I defended him by saying Daniel simply hates conflict. The response was immediate. Then he shouldn't have become a parent. People also compared Chloe and Madison. Madison is 22, dropped out of school, lives with an unemployed boyfriend, and depends on your financial help. Chloe is 18, works, studies, and earned acceptance into multiple colleges. You looked at those 2 situations and somehow decided Chloe was the one who needed to be humbled. That says everything. I argued that Madison had simply struggled more in life. Someone answered, "No. Madison has been enabled more. Those are 2 completely different things." I repeated that success doesn't automatically make Chloe better than everyone else. The final comment that stayed with me simply said, "Maybe not. But the way she carried herself while living under your roof absolutely made her a better person than you." It's been almost 3 months since Chloe moved out, and I wish I could honestly say everything settled down after that, but it only got worse. At first, I convinced myself the house might actually feel more peaceful without all the tension between us. I know that's an awful thing to admit, but constantly feeling her silent judgment had become exhausting. Chloe always walked through the house like she was counting the days until she could finally leave for good. There was always a certain emotional distance between us. I honestly believed that once Chloe moved out, the tension in the house would disappear and everyone would finally be able to relax. That isn't what happened at all. The first thing I noticed was our finances. Before anyone twists my words, I'm not saying I only miss Chloe because she was bringing money into the house. But the truth is, she did contribute. Probably more than I'd realized. Grocery shopping suddenly became much more difficult to manage. The utility bills seemed heavier than before. All those little household costs that had quietly been covered started piling up. I hadn't appreciated just how much Chloe's contribution helped keep everything balanced. At the same time, Madison still needed financial help. Things weren't going well for Madison and Ethan either. Ethan missed out on yet another job because, according to him, the manager had an attitude. Madison kept saying she was trying to find work that fit around her anxiety, but every opportunity seemed to fall apart before long. Their rent ended up being late twice. Then their phone bill came due, Ethan's car needed repairs, and after that he claimed he needed money to start a mobile car detailing business. That's when I finally told Madison we couldn't keep supporting them financially the way we had before. She burst into tears. She told me she'd spent her whole life being compared to Chloe and that everyone saw Chloe as perfect while treating her like she was worthless. I told her that wasn't how I saw her, but I understood why she felt that way. Not long after that, Ethan started sending messages directly to Daniel. At first they were just irritating. He kept saying things like, "Madison needs her family's support," and "You guys have money, so stop pretending you're broke." Eventually his messages became much more aggressive. He told Daniel that if he truly cared about Madison, he'd invest in their future. He even said he'd come over to talk man to man if Daniel continued ignoring him. That made Daniel furious. He turned to me and demanded to know why my daughter's boyfriend was threatening him over money. I tried to explain that Ethan was just under a lot of stress. Daniel looked at me and quietly replied, "So was Chloe." That comment made me angry. Daniel doesn't get to suddenly use Chloe as ammunition against me. While she still lived here, he hardly involved himself in any of it. He left me to deal with every difficult situation, and now he's acting like I was the only one responsible. I told him exactly that. He answered, "You took her money." I reminded him that he'd always known Chloe contributed financially. He looked back at me and said, "I didn't know it was that much." I replied, "That's because you never cared enough to ask." That ended the conversation. I'm not going to let Daniel rewrite the past and pretend he was some helpless observer. He was Chloe's father. If he disagreed with the way things were handled, he could have stepped in at any point. He chose not to because it was easier to let me be the strict parent. Even so, the house feels different now. Not happier. Just emptier. Chloe hasn't reached out to either of us. She didn't even call Daniel on his birthday. When he texted asking whether she was okay, she ignored him. The only message she eventually sent him came weeks later. She told him she was handling all of her college paperwork herself and that she wanted absolutely no contact with me. Me specifically. As though I was the only adult who had let her down. Later I heard from Daniel's cousin that Chloe had officially chosen one of the colleges that accepted her. Apparently she received a much better financial aid package than anyone expected, and several relatives pitched in to help pay for books and dorm supplies. My own sister even bought her a brand new laptop. That one really hurt. She'd never offered Madison that kind of support. When I brought it up, my sister didn't hesitate. She said, "Madison has had you financing her bad decisions for years. Chloe spent years having people take from her." After hearing that, I hung up. I'm exhausted by the way everyone has turned Madison into the villain. Madison is struggling. Chloe has always been capable. That's exactly why I expected more from Chloe. I already know people will say that proves I was only interested in her money. That isn't true. But I also can't deny that losing her financial contribution has created real stress inside our household. She was part of this family, and I believe family members help one another. I still don't understand why people insist that's abuse. If anything, I think walking away so suddenly was irresponsible. She knew everyone in the house depended on each person doing their share. Yet somehow Chloe gets praised for leaving. Meanwhile, I'm the one left cleaning up everything that fell apart afterward. The comments flooded in again. One person wrote, "You don't miss your stepdaughter. You miss her paycheck. That's your entire update." Another replied, "She says the house feels emptier because her unpaid source of income moved out." Someone else pointed out, "You admitted losing her financial contribution hurt the household. Your stepdaughter was 18. Your biological daughter was 22. Her boyfriend was 25. Somehow the teenager with 3 college acceptances ended up supporting the adults." They added, "That's embarrassing for every grown-up living in that house." I answered that Chloe had never been carrying the entire household. Someone immediately responded, "Then why did everything start falling apart the moment she left?" Another person quoted my own words back to me. "Madison is struggling. Chloe is capable. That's why I expected more from Chloe. There it is. Then they added, you punished the responsible child because the irresponsible one kept making bad decisions. That's practically a textbook example. I insisted it wasn't punishment. I believed it was teaching responsibility. Someone replied, responsibility would have been letting Chloe keep the paycheck she earned so she could pay for college. What you practiced was resentment disguised as redistribution. Other people turned their attention to Daniel. One comment read, Daniel is just as guilty. He watched his daughter get financially exploited for years and only found his backbone once your daughter's boyfriend started threatening his own wallet. Nobody in that house deserved Chloe. I admitted that Daniel absolutely should have done more. Another person answered, it's funny how clearly you can recognize his failures while staying completely blind to your own. Someone else addressed the laptop. Your sister bought Chloe a computer because she's actually going to college. She didn't buy Madison one because she'd probably end up pawning it to fund Ethan's next business idea. I thought that was rude and completely unfair. The reply came quickly. Is it really? Ethan threatening Daniel for money wasn't some shocking plot twist. It's exactly what happens after Madison spends years learning that someone else's wallet exists to solve her problems. I answered that I helped my daughter because I loved her. Someone shot back, you helped her by feeding her with Chloe's paycheck. That's not love. That's dependency built with stolen ingredients. Another person quoted me once again. She knew we depended on everyone doing their part. Then they added, you depended on the teenager you spent humiliating. That's certainly one strategy. A lot has happened since I wrote that last update. Daniel and I are getting divorced. I discovered he'd been having an affair with one of his coworkers. I wish I could honestly say I never saw it coming, but when I look back now, the warning signs were obvious. He started working late all the time. His phone suddenly became private. There were constant last-minute errands. All the usual clichés. The part that hurt the most wasn't even the affair itself. It was the way he tried to blame it on everything happening inside our home. He told me our marriage had been falling apart for years. He claimed he'd emotionally checked out long before I ever found out. According to him, our home had become a place filled with constant tension. Then he brought up Chloe. He looked me in the eye and said, I should have protected my daughter from you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he had the nerve to say something like that. For 10 years this man lived under the same roof as all of us. He watched me attend school conferences, schedule doctor's appointments, cook meals, do laundry, discipline the kids, manage the finances, and carry nearly every responsibility in that house. He saw every argument between Chloe and me. He watched Madison struggle year after year. He witnessed every bit of it. And instead of stepping up, he escaped into his job, and apparently into another woman's bed. Now he wants to pretend he's suddenly discovered a conscience. I looked at him and said, don't try to dress your cowardice up as integrity just because you've got yourself a girlfriend now. Daniel didn't have anything to say after that. The divorce has been messy from the very beginning. Going into it, I honestly believed I'd be financially secure. After everything I'd put into our marriage over the years, I expected I would walk away with much more than I did. Instead, I found out the situation was far more complicated than I'd realized. The house had belonged to Daniel before we ever got married, and there were legal documents I'd clearly misunderstood. Some of our finances had always been kept separate. During the divorce, my spending habits were examined closely, especially the money I'd sent to Madison and Ethan over the years. Daniel's attorney painted me as someone who handled money irresponsibly. Then Chloe's finances became part of the case too. That was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Apparently, Chloe had kept far more documentation than I ever imagined. She had records of transfers, screenshots, text messages, notes, everything. She never officially inserted herself into the divorce, but somehow all of that information ended up supporting Daniel's case. Daniel claimed he'd simply asked Chloe whether she had proof of what had happened, and she handed it over. Whether that's actually true, I honestly don't know anymore. At this point, I don't know what to believe. In the end, I received much less than I'd expected. I'm not homeless. But I certainly don't have enough money to continue living the lifestyle I once had. I had no choice but to move into a much smaller apartment. I sold some of my jewelry. I canceled subscriptions I used to take for granted. Now I'm trying to find additional work just to stay afloat. Through everything that's happened, though, Chloe hasn't reached out even once. That's the part one keep replaying in my mind. She knows what it feels like to be betrayed. She knows how deeply family can hurt you. She knows Daniel failed both of us, even if it happened in different ways. Yet she hasn't sent me a single message. No, I'm sorry you're going through this. No, are you okay? Nothing at all. After everything we've been through, she still sees me as the villain in her story. Things with Madison have become difficult too. When she learned about the divorce settlement, the very first thing she asked was how much money I'd received. I told her it wasn't any of her business. She immediately started talking about Ethan's car detailing business again. She insisted that if I invested my settlement money, they could finally get their lives together. I told her I couldn't afford to give them anything. She completely lost her temper. She accused me of always making her feel like she could never measure up to Chloe. She said I'd spent years comparing the two of them. I told her I'd never done that. Then she asked a question that left me speechless. If you never compared us, she said, then why were you using Chloe's money to support me? I didn't have an answer. Because the truth is, some of Chloe's earnings really did go toward helping Madison. I've admitted that from the beginning. Still, it never felt as simple to me as everyone else makes it sound. I believed I was trying to stop Madison from drowning. I wanted my daughter to know she wasn't worthless simply because Chloe always seemed to succeed. Madison looked at me and said, "You owe me because you made me this way." Not long afterward, Ethan grabbed Madison's phone and texted me himself. He wrote that if I truly loved my daughter, I'd give them enough money to start over. I blocked his number immediately. Later, Madison came to my apartment. She was crying one minute, yelling the next, begging for help, and then blaming everyone around her. She said Chloe had ruined everything by leaving and turning the whole family against us. For the first time, hearing those words made me feel sick. Because that's exactly how I used to think. Part of me probably still does. But another part of me has started seeing things differently. The house really was different when Chloe lived there. She was quiet. She was responsible. She helped without being asked. She worked, studied, paid attention to details, and even remembered when bills were due. She always cleaned up after herself. She rarely asked for anything. She never brought unemployed boyfriends into our lives demanding money. For years I convinced myself that her silence meant she was judging all of us. Now I wonder if she was simply exhausted. I hate admitting it, but I miss her. And no, I don't just mean the money, no matter what people assume. I miss the stability she brought into the house. I miss knowing there was at least one person who quietly handled her responsibilities without constant drama. I even miss how calm she always seemed, although I resented that calmness back then. Now I look at Madison asking me for money I don't have so she can support a man who can't keep a steady job. Then I remember Chloe finishing her shifts at the pharmacy after school and handing over most of her paycheck without yelling, complaining, or making demands. For a long time I believed Chloe made Madison feel small. Now I'm beginning to wonder if Chloe simply made Madison's choices impossible to ignore. I know I handled many things badly. I never should have posted that rejection letter. I never should have blocked her from the family chat before sharing it. I should have told everyone she'd already been accepted by 3 other colleges. I definitely should never have used her mother's prison sentence against her. And I should have handled her earnings much more carefully than I did. At the same time, I was carrying pressures of my own. I was trying to raise a girl whose biological mother had failed her while also trying to protect my own daughter from believing she was a failure. I was trying to hold together a marriage with a husband who emotionally checked out long before I realized it. I was trying to keep a household running where every single person seemed to need something from me. I wish Chloe could understand that. I wish she could see that I was never trying to destroy her. In my mind, I was trying to keep her grounded. I wanted to make sure she didn't become arrogant or forget where she'd come from. Maybe I crossed the line. Maybe I made far more mistakes than I was willing to admit. But I never woke up in the morning hoping to hurt her. I convinced myself Chloe needed to be humbled because she was acting like she was above the rest of us. Looking back now, I wonder if what I really couldn't stand was watching her build the kind of future that Madison kept choosing to walk away from. I truly wish I had handled everything differently. I wish I'd never posted Chloe's rejection letter for everyone to see. I also wish money hadn't become such a huge issue between us. But even now, a part of me still believes that if Chloe hadn't seemed so determined to prove she was better than the rest of us, maybe I wouldn't have felt such a strong need to bring her back down to earth. The responses came almost immediately. One person wrote, "You were so close to becoming self-aware, and then you immediately blamed Chloe for succeeding while your own daughter was struggling. Watching you do that was honestly painful." I replied that I'd admitted making mistakes. Someone answered, "Yes," and then you immediately followed it with, "Chloe made me do it because she stood too tall." That's not accountability. That's jealousy with better vocabulary. Another comment read, "You don't actually regret hurting Chloe. You regret losing her paycheck, her work, and the quiet stability she brought to a house full of adults behaving like raccoons fighting over food." I responded that wasn't true. I told them I genuinely missed Chloe as a person. Someone challenged me. "Name one thing you miss about her that wasn't useful to you." "We'll wait." Another person focused on Madison. "Your biological daughter is treating you exactly the way you taught her people should be treated. Take someone else's money. Demand more. Blame everyone else. Then call it family. Congratulations. She learned from the best." I defended Madison. I said she wasn't a bad person. The reply came quickly. "Neither was Chloe. That didn't stop you from treating her like she was some rehabilitation project whose paycheck belonged to you." Other people criticized Daniel again. One comment said, "Daniel is awful too. He watched his daughter get financially exploited and emotionally mistreated for years, and somehow only found his moral compass after his affair fell apart. Nobody in that house deserved Chloe." I admitted Daniel had failed in many ways. Someone answered, "Maybe he did. But his failures don't erase yours. Parenting isn't a contest where the worse parent makes the other one look better." I repeated something I'd believed for years. I said Chloe made Madison feel small. Someone immediately replied, "No. Madison's own choices made her feel small. Chloe was simply standing nearby with a strong work ethic." I thought that was unfair to Madison. The response was blunt. "You showed compassion to the person taking money, but almost none to the teenager earning it. That's an interesting pattern." Another comment returned to the rejection letter. "You posted one rejection while deliberately hiding 3 acceptance letters because the truth was never your goal. You wanted everyone to watch Chloe fail." I answered that Chloe had humiliated me afterward. The response was immediate. "No. She corrected the false picture you painted. If the truth embarrassed you, then the problem wasn't the truth." Someone else wrote, "Her mother was in prison. Her father stood by doing nothing. And the other adult in her life was taking her paychecks. That girl somehow survived an entire collection of bad parents." I argued that I wasn't a bad parent. Another person listed everything back to me. "You used her mother's imprisonment against her. You took the money she earned. You gave part of it to your adult daughter. You publicly posted her rejection letter. You blocked her before she could defend herself. Then you tried to stop her from leaving for college. If that's not bad parenting, where exactly is your line?" Then they added, "Do you need an actual dungeon before you'd call it abuse?" Another comment struck a nerve. You miss Chloe because she was useful. Chloe doesn't miss you because you were harmful. That's your entire story. I insisted I really did care about her. Someone replied, then why did every version of your care involve making her smaller, poorer, quieter, and keeping her closer to home? I answered the same way I always had. I told them I was trying to keep her grounded. The reply came almost instantly. She already was grounded. She worked after school, earned her own money, got accepted into 3 colleges, and handled her own paperwork while the adults around her stole from her, cheated on each other, and begged for money. You weren't grounding her. You were tying her to a sinking ship. Then someone quoted my own words again. Maybe if Chloe hadn't been so determined to prove she was better than us. They continued, she earned college acceptances, worked part-time, paid her own way, and escaped an unhealthy home. She proved she was better than you. That isn't arrogance. It's evidence. I answered that I didn't believe Chloe was better than I was. Someone replied with a single sentence. That's fine, because she doesn't actually need your permission. Another person addressed something I'd written earlier. You expect Chloe to comfort you through your divorce because she understands betrayal. She understands betrayal because of you. Then they added, you don't poison someone and later expect them to sit beside your hospital bed simply because they know what suffering feels like. One comment mentioned Madison. Then why were you using Chloe's money on me? That's probably the most honest sentence anyone in your family has spoken. They added, frame it. Hang it right next to the rejection letter you were so proud of posting. Another person summed everything up in a way I couldn't ignore. You wanted Chloe to be humbled. Instead, she got away. That's what really hurts. The final comment stayed with me longer than all the others. The saddest part is that Chloe probably would have helped you someday if you'd simply treated her with kindness. She was responsible. She was generous. She wanted freedom, not revenge. You turned her into the enemy because her future exposed how empty your excuses really were. They finished with one last sentence. Now Chloe has the future she worked for, and you're left living with the family dynamic you spent years defending.